Imagine walking into a building that actively learns your daily habits.
Like a really invasive smart home.
Yeah, exactly. But scaled up. So you take the exact same route to your office every single morning.
Right. It becomes muscle memory.
Totally. You know the distance, you know where all the turns are. But then one morning you step off the elevator and the hallway just isn't there.
Oh, wow. Just gone.
Just completely gone. The physical architecture of the building has literally changed its geometry while you weren't looking.
That is terrifying.
Right. And so you try to find a different way around, but a door that usually goes to, like, the break room now deposits you down in the mint.
Okay, I'd be looking for the hidden cameras at that point.
Oh, for sure. And it gets even stranger because you start to realize this building, it remembers every conversation ever had inside its walls.
It's basically recording everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a structure that doesn't just, house the people working inside it. It observes them, it reacts to them.
And maybe even understands them in some weird way.
Yeah. Like in some entirely foreign, non-human way, it actually comprehends what's going on.
If you walked into a place like that today, I mean, you'd think you were in some highly classified experimental AI facility.
Oh, absolutely. You'd assume you were standing inside a massive machine.
And you would immediately start looking for the infrastructure, right? Like, where is the server farm? Where are the optical sensors?
Yeah, you'd want to find the control room.
Exactly. The human brain craves a control room. We want to know who is sitting behind the monitor pulling the lever, or at least who wrote the base code.
Right. But the building we are looking at today for this deep dive, it doesn't have a...
Or if it did, the blueprints have been lost for centuries.
Yeah, the original architects have been dead for a...
Which brings us to our topic today.
Yes. Today we are taking a deep dive into an incredibly detailed source, a transcript from a video essay by the YouTube channel, The Sleepy Shack.
Right, titled The Creepiest Hogwarts Mysteries That Were Never Fully Explained.
And I want to set the parameters right up front for you listening. We aren't doing like a nostalgia.
No, not at all. We are skipping the whimsical magical school aesthetic.
Yeah, we are completely stripping away the cozy vibes.
We are approaching this castle purely as a structural anomaly.
Exactly, because the core thesis that emerges from this source material is that Hogwarts operates as a complex adaptive ecosystem.
Right. The source suggests the castle functions on these deep layers of residual magic, forgotten intention.
Autonomous systems that completely defy conventional magic.
Even the theory established in its own universe. We're looking at a structure that was built as a school, but over 1,000 years.
It's evolved into something closer to an organism.
Exactly. It's almost biological.
Okay, so let's unpack this. And I want to start with the literal foundation.
The architecture itself.
Yeah, because when you picture a medieval Scottish castle, picture heavy stone, right? Immovable permanence.
Yeah, big blocks of unyielding geography.
But the source material, it strips that illusion away immediately.
Right. Because of the shifting layout.
Exactly. It points out that people who spend enough time there constantly experience the building altering its layout.
The moving staircases are the most famous example.
Yeah, staircases that shift their physical positions while people are literally standing on them.
Which, just from a physics standpoint, is wild.
It's insane. Millions of tons of stone just swinging through the air, and entire corridors extend or shorten their physical length.
Doors changing their destinations entirely.
Right. And the mechanics of that are what demand our attention.
Because if this were just an effect of magical decay-like ancient enchantment slowly breaking down, you'd expect the architecture to shift in erratic, chaotic ways.
Yeah, like a staircase swinging into a solid wall and just crushing itself.
Exactly. Catastrophic failures.
Yeah.
But it doesn't function like that. The shifting actually follows an undocumented logic.
Right. The source specifically states that the moving staircases don't operate on a fixed mechanical cycle.
They aren't like clockwork gear.
No. Sometimes they align perfectly to allow a student direct travel to their class.
And other times, they deliberately swing away.
Yeah, actively misleading people and depositing them in entirely unfamiliar sections of the castle.
It's like relying on a modern GPS navigation system, but the algorithm alters the physical city grid based on variables you can't even see.
That is the perfect analogy. Sometimes it helps you because you're late for work, and other times it actively reroutes you into a dead end.
Because the city itself doesn't want you in that neighborhood.
Wow. Yeah, and the text notes that the layout actively resists being permanently mapped.
Even standard magical tracking tools struggle to keep up with it.
Which makes sense because mapping requires a static subject, right? Or at least something moving within predictable parameters.
And the castle does neither of those things. It's fluid.
Yeah.
And the selectivity of these changes is the really crucial piece of evidence here.
Right. The source highlights that certain individuals find their way with ease, while others are perpetually disoriented.
Which means the castle parses the intent of its occupant. It's reading them.
I want to look at the founder's intent here, though, because the common justification you hear is that the founders designed it this way intentionally.
Right, as a defensive labyrinth to confuse attacking army.
Exactly. But that explanation kind of falls apart when you look at the day-to-day behavior of the building.
Oh, completely.
Right.
Because a traditional defensive labyrinth is hostile to everyone who doesn't possess the key.
Right, it doesn't pick and choose.
But this building adapts its hostility. The source notes that especially during times of internal danger, the shifting becomes acutely purposeful.
Yeah, pathways close off, new routes organically open up.
It guides students away from immediate threats without them even realizing they're being ushered to safety.
Which requires an environmental awareness that borders on
It really does. Think about the processing power required for that. To guide a student away from a threat, the castle has to simultaneously track the physical location of the student.
and track the location and trajectory of whatever the threat is.
Exactly. Calculate an intersecting path, and then physically alter millions of tons of stone to construct a diversion.
All in real time.
In real time. And the faculty simply accepts this as a quirky environment.
Right. They just give the students vague guidance, like, watch out for the trick step.
Yeah, because they don't actually explain the underlying mechanism. The mechanism has been lost.
The administration literally does not know how the building.
Not at all.
Okay, so it's not just the physical geometry of the hallways doing things it shouldn't. Let's talk about the material composition of the walls.
Oh, the acoustic. This part is fascinating.
It is deeply unsettling. There's this detail in the transcript about a disembodied voice.
Right. A voice moving fluidly through the castle without a visible origin.
Yeah, and it didn't echo down the hallways like a normal sound wave bouncing off stone.
No. It travels along hidden routes within the structure itself.
Emerging at highly specific points. And the most disturbing part, it was only heard by those who speak parcel tongue.
The magical language of snakes.
Exactly. To everyone else standing in the exact same room, it was just dead silent.
Or maybe just a vague atmospheric sense of dread, but no actual audio.
Right. And we really have to isolate the acoustic physics of that event.
Absolutely. The source points out that the sound traveled through solid medieval stonework without any audio distortion.
Which makes no sense under normal physical laws.
Or even under the standard magical theory in that universe. Solid, dense structures muffle or absorb sound waves.
But this voice remained completely clear, deliberate, and perfectly directed at its target.
Now, people usually wave this away by saying, well, it was the basilisk.
Right. For anyone listening who might be unfamiliar, a basilisk is this massive, highly lethal, mythical serpent that was essentially living in the basement.
Right, so people assume the voice was just the snake slithering through the plumbing.
Yeah, just shouting through the pipe. But the source explicitly argues that giant pipes don't fully account for how the sound was transmitted so perfectly.
Exact. The biological movement of a giant serpent explains the origin of the sound, sure, but it utterly fails to explain the manner of its transmission.
Right. If a massive creature is vocalizing inside a metal water pipe, it echoes.
It would reverberate chaotically. It wouldn't be a targeted whisper.
So what's the alternative theory?
The transcript theorizes that the castle contains an entirely separate, undocumented internal infrastructure.
Like not physical plumbing for water.
Right. Conduits specifically designed to transmit specific magical frequencies or presence.
Wow. Operating completely independently of the physical corridors that the humans...
Exactly.
So you're talking about like a hidden nervous system running through the masonry.
Essentially, yes. A nervous system.
That is so...
If acoustic data can travel through these internal pathways without physical distortion and only interface with a recipient tuned to the exact right biological frequency.
In this case, parcel tongue.
Right. It implies the walls themselves act as a directed transmission network. The castle has layers of functional infrastructure operating entirely invisibly.
Okay, speaking of hidden nervous systems, we have to look at the suits of armor.
Oh, the armor. Yes.
At first glance, they just look like decorative antiques, right? Just atmospheric set dressing for a castle.
Yeah, just museum piece.
But the source text details how they shift their position. They actively adjust their physical posture.
Students report hearing the metallic sounds of joints moving.
Yeah, breastplates shifting when the corridors are otherwise told quiet.
And specifically when no one is supposed to be watching them.
Right. The observation that their micro-movements occur primarily when unobserved is the detail that matters.
It indicates that their primary function is not to interact socially with the daily life of the school.
No, they're not greeters. The source poses a massive question regarding their underlying enchantment.
Right. Are these objects animated continuously, burning magical energy around the clock?
Or are they activated only under specific environmental triggers?
Right. But wait, I have to challenge this idea of the armor as some brilliant, highly calibrated defense network.
Okay, go for it.
If it's so adaptable and so aware, why is it so famously ineffective at stopping actual threats?
That is a very fair point.
I mean, a mountain troll gets into the dungeon and wreaks havoc. Sirius Black breaks into the castle and literally slashes the fat lady's portrait to ribbons.
Right.
If the armor is a defensive surveillance grid, it seems less like a sentient protector and more like a broken, highly unreliable security camera system.
Right, like one that only works when the plot demands.
Exactly.
Well, that is a critical flaw, but the source argues it actually supports the idea of an undocumented complex system rather than just a broken one.
Oh, how so?
Consider the parameters of those specific breaches. The troll didn't break through the exterior defenses, right?
True, it was let in by a faculty member, Quirrell.
Exactly. And Sirius Black didn't blast the doors down either. He slipped in utilizing knowledge of secret passages.
Ah, I see.
So the armor's threat assessment algorithm might be conditionally programmed to ignore entities that bypass the perimeter wards smoothly.
Or it might be instructed not to override the actions of a teacher, like in Quirrell's case.
Yes. They are stationed strategically at key transition areas, staircases, main entrances, intersections.
So it's a distributed network.
A distributed network. And the source notes that during the Battle of Hogwarts, an instance of total, undeniable siege, their behavior fundamentally changes.
Right, they don't just twitch in the background anymore.
No, they mobilize into a coordinated infantry.
So they possess a mode-switching capability.
They do. The enchantments governing them are not fixed in a single state.
They continuously evaluate the environmental threat level.
Probably relying on the castle's ambient awareness, right? And then they shift their operational state from passive observation to active.
But the horrific part is that the current headmasters and teachers don't know the administrative override codes for these systems.
Yeah, they can ask the statues to help in a crisis, but they aren't the ones running the background process.
The castle is managing its own security up.
That's wild. Okay, so we'd established that the physical space is fluid, and it's being passively monitored by a decentralized network of armor.
Right.
But what happens when the physical architecture adapts so drastic that it actually shatters the boundaries of physical dimensions?
This is where we get into the really mind-bending stuff.
Yeah. If the walls and stairs are actively shifting to monitor and protect the students, what happens when a student's need is so urgent that the existing architecture simply isn't enough?
The castle bends physical reality to manufacture entirely new space.
Yes, the room of requirement.
Arguably the most profound spatial anomaly detailed in the entire source text.
It's a room that flat out does not appear on any schematic or map. You can't pick the lock because there isn't a door. Not normally, anyway.
Right. It only materializes when a person is experiencing a genuine, acute need.
And they have to pace past a very specific stretch of blank wall while holding a clear intention in their mind.
The mechanism of manifestation here is what separates it from standard transfiguration.
How so?
It doesn't just unlock a hidden physical door. It generates a bespoke environment tailored to the user's cognitive.
Right. If a group needs a secure location to practice defensive magic, it doesn't just provide an empty hall.
Exactly. It provides highly specific instruments, dark detectors, instructional texts, everything they need.
Here's where it gets really though. The source points out that the room doesn't just act like a voice-activated smart assistant.
Right. You don't just say, give me a hiding spot, and it gives you a generic closet.
Exactly. A person can enter with a vague general intention, but the room provides specific tools or resources that the person didn't even know they needed yet.
Which means it is reading subconscious desires.
Yes. It anticipates unspoken operational requirements.
And that requires an invasive level of cognitive perception.
Oh, totally invasive.
To anticipate a need better than the user can articulate it, the room has to act as a psychological mirror.
It isn't just generating matter.
No, it is scanning the mental state of the occupant, parsing their anxieties, their goals, their latent knowledge.
And then translating that psychological data into physical architecture.
But the psychological aspect is only half of it. The physical reality of the room breaks the laws of physics entirely.
We have to talk about the storage form.
Yes, the source details the storage. This is the version of the room that appears when someone simply needs a place to hide an object.
A version that has been used by thousands of students over centuries.
And the volume of that specific iteration is staggering.
The text describes it as a sprawling city of discarded objects.
Exact. Forming labyrinthine pathways through towering stacks of furniture, books, weapons.
Centuries of lost item extending as far as the eye.
We're talking about piles and piles of centuries of physical mass.
So physically, where does all that mass go?
That's the paradox. To house that vast accumulation of physical matter, the internal dimensions of the room must vastly exceed the exterior architectural footprint of that section of the castle.
It is a spatial paradox.
It implies the room does not exist within the physical constraints of the castle's blueprints at all.
Right. It exists in an extra-dimensional pocket, a space alongside or beyond visible reality.
And the door merely acts as a temporary dimensional bridge.
It's a pocket dimension tied to human cognition. That is so wild.
It really is.
But the room of requirement isn't the only hidden space, and it's fascinating to compare it to the others.
Right. Let's look at the Chamber of Secrets versus the third-floor corridor.
The Chamber of Secrets, ancient, cavernous space buried deep in the bedrock below.
The source emphasizes the sheer terrifying scale of it.
Yeah, a sprawling network of subterranean passages culminating in a cathedral-like space.
Built specifically to house a basilisk.
Right, and the chamber represents a phenomenal feat of covert, permanent engineering.
It was constructed 1,000 years ago during the original founding of the school, completely undetected by the other three founders.
Which is insane to think about. How do you hide a construction project of that scale?
Well, the security architecture is particularly brutal. It doesn't use a magical lock that can be dismantled with a counterspell.
No, it uses a biological parcel tongue again.
Exactly. You have to literally have the genetic magical trait of speaking to snakes to even open the sink that leads down there.
It ensured that only a highly specific ideological bloodline could ever access.
But the most remarkable structural aspect is its permanence.
Right, it survived for 10 centuries.
Remaining completely intact and entirely hidden, even while the castle above it was constantly shifting, expanding, and adapting its geometry.
So the chamber is entirely immune to the castle's fluid architecture.
Exactly. It is an immovable anchor of ancient secrecy.
It's hard-coded into the foundation.
Now contrast that with the third-floor corridor.
Right, which was heavily featured early in the school's modern. The source describes this as a completely different category of hidden.
It wasn't built to be a secret lair. It was just a standard, ordinary corridor.
Probably used for classrooms or storage originally.
Right. But it was temporarily hijacked to house extreme, highly lethal protection.
A giant three-headed dog, deadly botanical tracks, logic puzzles.
The contrast here really illustrates the spectrum of the castle's adaptability.
Yes, so.
While the chamber is a massive, permanent, covert installation built for a deeply ideological intent.
Well, the third-floor corridor is an ordinary space haphazardly and temporarily adapted for a functional, immediate.
Exactly, protecting a specific artifact, the Philosopher's Stone.
And the source notes that the moment the stone was removed and the crisis passed, the corridor just reverted back.
It didn't retain any inherent magic, didn't scar the hull.
So what this demonstrates is the castle's incredible structural tolerance.
Yes, it can accommodate deliberate, ancient, permanent secrecy in its basement, and it can accommodate temporary, chaotic, almost makeshift modifications on its upper floors.
All without compromising its core identity or collapsing in on itself.
It absorbs spatial anomalies effortlessly.
Okay, so the interior of the castle is a nightmare of spatial anomaly fluid physics.
A controlled night.
But what about the edges of the map? If the inside is this tightly, albeit strangely controlled ecosystem, what happens when that ecosystem rubs up against the outside world?
A wild borders.
Exactly. Let's step outside the castle walls and look at the forbidden forest and the black.
The exterior geography is just as functionally complex as the interior architecture.
Right. The source states definitively that the Forbidden Forest predates the founding of...
Its origins are ancient and undocumented. And when the four founders selected the geographic location for Hogwarts, they made a highly unusual choice.
They didn't clear the forest to establish a safe perimeter.
No, they built the school directly beside it.
Which is crazy. It's the equivalent of building a state-of-the-art, high-tech smart home directly on the edge of the Amazon rainforest.
Putting up a knee-high decorative fence and pretending you have total control over the property.
Exact. The school claims the grounds, but the forest does not respect that.
And the source points out a terrifying spatial aspect to the woods itself.
Right. The deeper you walk into it, the more the physical distances seem to stretch and expand.
Landmarks disappear. The ambient light and the way sound travels behave differently the further in you go.
So by choosing that specific location, the founders deliberately establish a hard boundary.
A boundary between structured, controlled magical order, represented by the castle, and an unpredictable, ancient, chaotic ecosystem.
Because the forest is not just empty wood, it houses highly advanced autonomous societies.
Yes, the centaurs, for one. They possess their own astronomical divination systems, their own territorial laws, and rigid social hierarchy.
And the acromantulas, the giant spiders, operate an apex predator colony deep in the center.
The source makes it abundantly clear that the school does not manage or control the forest.
Not at all. The forest exists as a sovereign state, right on the school's doorstep, maintaining its own brutal internal balance.
And you see a very similar dynamic with the Black Lake.
Oh, absolutely. This massive, dark body of water directly adjacent to the castle.
It houses a vast community of merpeople with their own underwater architecture.
But the physical scale of the lake really settled. The source notes that the true depth of the lake has never actually been measured or documented by the school.
The water becomes too dark, the pressure too intense, making full exploration impossible.
And of course you have the giant squid casually swimming around.
Right. The giant squid is a fascinating ecological contradiction within the text.
How so?
Normally, a biological entity of that immense scale and power coexisting near a heavily populated school would be categorized as a critical threat.
Yeah, you'd think they would try to get rid of it.
Yet the source notes it is incredibly docile, calm, and seemingly immortal.
It interacts with students who fall in the water without any predatory hostility. It literally just tosses them back out.
It's just chilling.
Yeah, just casually hanging out.
The text suggests a deeper symbiosis, though. Its consistent, unbothered behavior over generations implies it might play a regulatory role.
Like maintaining the biological balance of the lake's ecosystem.
Exactly. It operates on ancient internal environmental conditions that are entirely separate from the chaotic, magical politics happening in the castle right above the surface.
And the school just tolerates its presence because they have no means to remove it anyway.
Right. They respect the boundary out of necessity.
But what happens when the borders aren't just natural boundaries, but engineered vulnerabilities?
Oh. Breaches in the perimeter.
Yeah. The source dives into how the castle's perimeter is explicitly breached, focusing on the vanishing cabinet and shack.
The vanishing cabinet represents a catastrophic failure in the castle's security arc.
Truly catastrophic. The source describes it as one half of a paired system,
linking a room inside Hogwarts to a shop located entirely outside the school's protective.
And what is critical to understand here is the transport mechanism. It doesn't rely on physical travel.
Or even standard magical teleportation like apparition, which the castle famously blocks.
Right. It relies on a spatial linkage. It essentially folds space so that stepping into the cabinet in the castle is the exact same physical action as stepping out of the cabinet miles away.
It totally bypasses centuries of interwoven, incredibly complex protective enchantments.
Which is mad. You have this impenetrable fortress with moving walls, ancient magic, and a decentralized armored defense network.
And some student just leaves a back door open in a dusty, forgotten storage room.
Yeah. The source points out that this cabinet sat damaged and completely unnoticed by the administration for years.
It reveals a massive blind spot in the ecosystem.
Right. The castle is highly adept at defending against external physical assaults and sweeping magical force.
But it struggles to detect or regulate internal, passive objects that create localized dimensional bridges.
It proves that items can exist within the castle whose true, highly dangerous purpose are completely forgotten by the very people supposed to monitor.
Now, the Shrieking Shack is a completely different type of...
Right. It wasn't a forgotten artifact. It was an intentionally engineered vulnerability.
They dug a hidden tunnel connecting the castle grounds directly to an abandoned house in the neighboring village.
And to guard the entrance, they planted the Whomping Willow,
which is not merely a dangerous species of flora. In this context, it functions as an active biological defense mechanism.
It was placed there with a highly specific operational directive.
Guard the tunnel entrance. It attacks any kinetic movement within its striking radius.
It is a living, bludgeoning barrier.
And they built this tunnel for a highly specific temporary medical need.
Right, to isolate a single student during painful lunar transformations so he wouldn't attack other students.
But what is truly compelling here is the aftermath. The source points out that the shack's reputation far outlived its actual function.
That is where the psychology of magic...
Exactly. The local villagers didn't know about the werewolf. They only heard the horrific screams echoing from the house once a month.
So they collectively concluded it was the most violently haunted building in Britain.
And the text proposes that this collective belief wasn't just harmless gossip.
Right. The sheer volume of localized fear, combined with the extreme residual trauma of the transformations that occurred inside, actually gave the shack an enduring, almost sentient, haunted identity.
The building's function shifted from a practical isolation ward to a generalized place of deep unease.
It absorbed the fear.
It demonstrates a feedback loop in this magical world. Intent, extreme emotion, and collective belief can permanently scar the metaphysical environment.
The magic responds to the narrative the humans place.
It's a terrifying thought.
It really is. So the physical borders of the castle have these massive blind spots, natural and engineered.
But while the castle might have a hard time monitoring a wooden cabinet, it possesses internal systems designed to peer directly into the minds and identities of the people walking its halls.
Yes. Let's move away from physical space and talk about identity. Let's look at the Marauder's map and the Sorting Hat.
These two artifacts represent a profound intersection between advanced magical theory and fundamental human identity.
Let's analyze the map first. As the source breaks it down, the map does not merely represent a static, top-down schematic of the physical.
No, it actively tracks and reflects the real-time movement of every single individual within the castle's boundaries.
While simultaneously adapting to the fluid, shifting architecture we discussed earlier.
Right. And its identification system is flawless.
It completely ignores invisibility clues, regardless of how powerful they are.
It ignores physical disguise posts. It ignores standard concealment charms.
The source says it doesn't track a physical body. It identifies the inherent magical signature of a person.
Which implies a level of magical surveillance that is almost impossible to comprehend.
Because standard magical protections operate by bending light or altering physical perception. Yeah.
Exactly. The map bypasses physical perception entirely and reads the ontological truth of the individual.
It knows who you are at a fundamental, energetic level.
But here is where I need to push back hard on the lore.
Okay, let's hear it.
The lore tells us this map was created by a group of 4 teenagers. Brilliant teenagers, sure, but still high school students.
Right.
I have to ask, if they created a surveillance tool this powerful, why haven't these technologies been replicated by the government or the military?
That's a great question.
The source explicitly notes there are no known attempts in history that have produced another map like this. Are we really supposed to believe 4 kids outsmarted the entire magical scientific community?
Well, that is the exact logical friction the source material wants.
And does it offer an alternative theory?
It does. It offers a highly compelling one. The map is likely not generating the surveillance data itself.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the map's ability to interpret the castle's geometric changes in real time and track magical signatures flawlessly suggests it has achieved a direct parasitic integration with the castle's own undocumented sensory.
Oh, wow. So the Marauders didn't invent the cameras, they just built the monitor.
Exactly. They hacked the castle's mainframe and created a display terminal for the data the building was already quietly collecting.
They found a way to interface with the castle's emergent scent. That makes so much more sense.
Right. And the Sorting Hat operates on a similar but far more psychological level.
The source details how the hat does not rely on a student answering a questionnaire or displaying visible skills.
It bypasses the conscious mind entirely.
It accesses latent information, reading subconscious traits, deeply buried preferences, and future potential.
And the source notes that the hat contains actual, preserved fragments of the original 4 founders' consciousness.
That's how it evaluates students. It uses the founders' own digitized cognitive bias.
Yeah, and the creepiest part, it composes new songs every year, actively incorporating current political and social events.
Which means it isn't just sitting in an office dormant for the rest of the year.
Exactly. It is constantly observing, learning, and updating its understanding of the world. Its magic is entirely self.
Both the hat and the map suggest a disturbing reality about this ecosystem.
Which is?
Human identity, no matter how complex or hidden, is something that can be fundamentally mapped, read, categorized, and judged by ancient.
Privacy, in the truest sense, does not exist within those walls.
Which is deeply unsettling.
It is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't just map who you are right now. This magic heavily manipulates how you perceive the past, too. Let's examine the pensive and the mirror of Arised.
But pensive fundamentally shatters our real-world understanding of the distinction between subjective memory and objective history.
Yeah, when a memory is extracted from a brain and placed into the physical liquid of it doesn't play back like a video recording from a single point.
It becomes a fully navigable, three-dimensional environment.
This part absolutely broke my brain.
It's wild to think about.
If I think back to a conversation I had yesterday, I only remember what I was physically looking at. I remember the person's face. I don't remember the exact title of the book on the shelf behind me.
Right, our brains filter that out.
But the source explicitly points out that an observer using a pensive can walk around freely within the memory and inspect elements like documents on a desk or people whispering in a corner that the original person didn't even notice at the time.
How does a biological brain capture detailed visual data that the optic nerve didn't consciously register?
Right.
It implies a radical theory of neuromagic. It suggests that the human subconscious acts as a passive 360-degree environmental scanner.
The brain absorbs every photon of light, every acoustic vibration in a room.
But the conscious mind filters out 99% of it just to maintain sanity.
So the magic of the pensive doesn't just replay what you focus. It unpacks the raw, unfiltered, latent data stored in the deep subconscious to literally reconstruct reality from the ground up.
It's like downloading the raw code of a video game level instead of just taking a screenshot. You get the whole environment.
That is exactly it. But the source also notes a crucial limit.
It provides objective environmental truth, but it cannot reveal internal.
Right. You can walk around the memory of a room, but you still have to guess what the people in the room were thinking.
You see the action objectively, but you must interpret the motive subject. It is an artifact of profound truth, but it still requires human analysis.
And directly opposing that, you have the mirror of a rape.
Right, where the pensive projects objective, historical reality, the mirror projects subjective, impossible desires.
The source highlights that its origin is completely unknown. It just showed up in the castle one day.
And it doesn't just reflect a fleeting surface thought like, I want a sandwich.
No, it reaches into the absolute deepest parts of the psyche and constructs a highly detailed, unified visual narrative of a person's most desperate, often unexpressed longing.
And its danger lies in its complete lack of external utility.
Most powerful magical artifacts do something. They heal, they destroy, they transport.
The mirror is entirely inward-focused. It exists solely to interface with the internal emotional state of the viewer.
It's almost like a magical version of the worst kind of modern grief tech, where people train AI to mimic love.
That's a dark comparison, but it's accurate. The source notes that prolonged exposure creates a devastating psychological loop.
The viewer becomes paralyzed, staring at a reality they can never have,
reinforcing the desire until they completely lose touch with their actual surroundings. People have starved to death sitting in front of it.
It's a predatory artifact that feeds on human longing.
It incapacitates through fulfillment.
And if the manipulation of memory and psychological desire wasn't complex enough, the source moves into the ultimate time.
Ah, yes, the mechanics of time travel in this.
The source explains that time turners allow controlled movement backward through the temporal stream.
But the vital mechanical detail is that it operates as a strictly closed loop.
You move back in time, but you do not branch off into a new alternate reality.
You remain part of the exact same timeline you actively coexist with your past self.
This raises immense philosophical and physical questions regarding causality.
The source points out the inherent paradox. If your interactions in the past were always part of the historical timeline before you even decided to travel back.
Are you actually altering time, or is time simply a rigid structure accommodating the traveler?
Exactly. The events that appear to be changed by the time traveler were, in fact, always caused by the time traveler.
Cause and effect aren't a linear progression, they are a circle.
It's the ultimate deterministic nightmare.
But the source highlights something really interesting about how society handles. There are severe, completely undocumented restrictions placed on these devices by the governing magical body.
The absolute cardinal rule is that you cannot be seen by your past self.
And the text points out that the consequences for breaking that rule are never clearly defined scientifically.
But the strictness of the law implies risk of a catastrophic magnitude.
Right. If the timeline is a closed, unbreakable loop, what actually happens if you walk up and shake hands with your past self?
Does the biological shock kill you, or does it create a localized temporal paradox that unravels reality itself?
The Ministry of Magic doesn't explain the physics to the public. They just lock the devices in a highly guarded room and heavily.
The lack of scientific disclosure is the terrifying aspect. The government restricts the technology based on catastrophic risks they refuse to make public.
It represents a form of magic that has been proceduralized, turned into a tool without its underlying physical principles being fully understood or disclosed.
They are playing with the fabric of reality and hoping the safety catch holds.
So we have these incredible, highly dangerous artifacts, storing minds, reading desires, and looping time.
But what about the actual literal remnants of the people who interacted with this magic and never left?
The ones who are permanently stuck in the ecosystem. Let's delve into the lingering histories, the ghosts, and the curse.
The source approaches ghosts not as mere spooky apparitions, but as individuals trapped in an intermediate state of existence.
They retain their physical appearance at the moment of death and their core personality, but they cannot physically alter their environment.
And more importantly, they seem incapable of experiencing deep psychological growth or change. They are a fixed, stagnant point in the castle's history.
And what's fascinating is the source notes that Hogwarts acts as a unique, powerful hub that sustains them.
You don't see massive populations of ghosts hanging out in regular magical villages.
There is something about the dense, concentrated magical field of the castle that either encourages their formation or provides the energetic sustenance they need.
And because they cannot evolve, they carry their historical trauma with them eternal.
The source performs a deep dive into the specific dynamic between Bloody Baron and the Grey.
They are bound together by the trauma of a horrific, unresolved murder.
The Baron, in a fit of rage, murdered the Grey Lady, who was Helena Ravenclaw, the daughter of a founder, and then, overcome with remorse, took his own life.
And they both came back as ghosts, permanently tied to the exact same castle.
But the source points out the tragedy, the exact details of their final encounter, the nuanced, true motivations behind the act remain complete.
Neither of them offers a complete objective account to the students or faculty.
They just exist in this heavy, silent, agonizing proximity to each other, century after century.
It is a profound manifestation of a lack of closure, immortalized and put on display within the castle.
They are bound by their violent history, yet the explanation is absent.
Now contrast that stagnant existence with the portraits.
The portraits are everywhere. Thousands of them lining every wall, staircase, and office.
They speak, they observe the students, they gossip, and they can physically move between different frames connected to the castle's network.
But the source makes a vital, chilling distinction about what they actually are. They were not the true consciousness or soul of the...
No, the source clarifies that they are essentially taught to mimic the subject.
When a headmaster is painted, they spend their final years talking to the portrait, sharing memories, catchphrases, and behavioral tics.
The portrait's perspective and personality are entirely confined to what it was explicitly programmed to know and what it observes from its fixed position on the wall.
It does not possess true, independent, evolving awareness beyond its program.
So are portraits essentially magical AI deepfake trained on the deceased person's memories?
Like if you fed all of a historical figure's text messages and emails into a language model and asked to act like them forever.
That is a remarkably apt comparison. They are a highly complex interact imitation.
And their function within the castle is largely administrative.
They serve as a decentralized surveillance and communication tool, relaying messages across the castle instantly, guarding passwords, reporting rule breakers.
But they exist in an intermediate state. They possess memory and automated response, but they lack the spark of a true soul.
They are an interactive archive, bound strictly to a closed two-dimensional network.
An interactive archive, I love that frame. But not all the history lingering in the castle is a passive ghost or a helpful, chatty painting.
Some of the residual history is actively, violently hostile.
I want to look at a more abstract haunting. The curse on the defense against the dark arts teaching.
This is perhaps one of the most significant structural anomalies in the entire text.
For decades, stretching back over half a century, no single teacher has lasted more than one academic year in that.
And it's not because the curriculum is hard. The source highlights that this curse is completely
The person who allegedly cast it, Voldemort, didn't need to return to the castle every year to renew it.
He didn't need to maintain it. He cast it once, and it embedded itself into the fabric of the school.
And its method of operation is incredibly indirect and insidious. It doesn't strike the teacher with a bolt of lightning on the first day of class.
That is the defining characteristic of its horror. The mechanism of the curse constantly shifts.
One teacher is forced to resign due to public scandal. Another suffers a severe cognitive injury. Another is exposed as a fraud. Another is literally...
The outcome is always identically absolute. They are removed from the position by the end of the year, but the pathway to that outcome is wildly varied.
Which means this localized curse isn't just a physical trap. It's a force that manipulates probability,
Human behavior, and external circumstance to achieve a guaranteed specific outcome. It bends reality to ensure a firing.
It shapes the educational continuity of the entire school. Generations of students receive fractured, inconsistent, and often highly dangerous instruction in arguably the most vital subject for their survival.
Yet the truly disturbing aspect noted by the source is the institutional apathy. The administration simply accepts.
Right. They don't rename the class to break the contractual parameter. They don't divide the subject into smaller, uncursed modules.
The headmaster just sighs, posts a job listing, and manages the inevitable, often fatal fallout year after year.
It has become an accepted, immovable feature of their daily reality. They just accept that reality is permanently broken in this one.
It speaks to the psychological toll the castle takes on its inhabitants. They normalize anomalies.
And this acceptance of broken, hidden, or dangerous things extends directly to the curation of knowledge. The source touches on the library's...
It's not just a locked gate keeping kids away from books that bite or books that scream.
The source asks a much deeper question about the curation of... It's about what is missing.
The concept of lost knowledge is central to understanding the castle's current state.
The source posits a scenario. What books, over 1,000 years, were quietly removed by previous headmasters without any administrative record?
If certain texts were deemed too volatile or ideologically dangerous, even for the restricted section, the library ceases to be a complete historical archive.
It becomes a curated narrative full of invisible gaps.
And this perfectly mirrors the loss of the founder's knowledge itself.
The castle currently functions. The stairs move. The room of requirement provides, the ceiling reflects the weather, but the underlying mechanisms of its creation have been entirely lost on.
How was the shifting architecture coded? What is the energy?
The founders constructed an incredibly complex, localized reality machine, but the instruction manual did not survive.
The current inhabitants, even the most brilliant headmasters, are essentially just end users.
They push the buttons, they observe the outputs, and they hope the system doesn't crash.
They preserve the results of the magic, but they do not understand the process.
So we have a castle filled with fragmented knowledge, lingering trauma, a localized curse manipulating reality, and fluid walls trying to hold it all.
When immense external pressure is applied to this highly unstable ecosystem, how does it react?
This brings us to the ultimate question posed by the source. Let's look at emergent sentience and accumulated magic, specifically how the castle behaves under X threat.
The source draws a brilliant comparison between two distinct periods of major conflict.
During the first wizarding, characterized by guerrilla attacks and a climate of pervasive societal terror, Hogwarts maintained an eerie, rigid.
While the government and the outside world were collapsing in chaos, school continued to operate almost normal.
The protective enchantments held the perimeter, the administration strictly controlled the flow of information, and the castle acted as a passive penetrator.
But the Battle of Hogwarts, decades later, was an entirely different scenario.
It wasn't a Cold War. It was a direct, localized siege on the grounds themselves.
And the source recounts how during that siege, the castle completely stopped being a passive setting. It seemingly woke up.
Pathways autonomously opened to assist defending students and immediately closed to trap attacking forces.
The statues, the gargoyles, the suits of armor we talked about earlier, they fully mobilized and engaged in brutal melee combat against.
And while one could argue that some of this mobilization was triggered by specific incantations from the faculty, the sustained, complex coordination of these movements across the massive, sprawling campus suggested a tactical response that was not fully directed by any single human mind.
The faculty couldn't possibly micromanage hundreds of statues while simultaneously fighting for their own lives.
The castle's physical layout and internal assets adjusted themselves independently to facilitate the defense.
So was this a conscious, deliberate choice made by a thinking building, or was it just the chaotic, emergent property of billions of enchantments bouncing off each other in a closed space?
What does this all mean?
That is the crux of the source text's final overarching analysis. It introduces the theory of residual magic.
The premise is that every single spell cast over a millennia, every powerful enchantment laid into the foundation, every intense burst of magical emotion leaves a faint microscopic imprint on the environment.
Over 1,000 years, with hundreds of magical children practicing every day in a highly concentrated space.
Precise. Those layers of residual magic accumulate. They seep into the stone.
They begin to interact with the active, intentional enchantments placed by the founder, and eventually, they reach a critical mass.
The shifting architecture, the psychological mirroring of the room of requirement, the mode switching of the armor, the coordinated tactical defense during the battle. The source argues that these are not individual, isolated magical tricks.
They are the result of the castle functioning as a massive, unified, highly reactive organism.
The environment itself responds to the immense weight of its own history.
Exactly. The castle isn't alive in the biological human sense. It doesn't have a centralized brain, it doesn't experience human emotion, and it doesn't possess a cohesive personality.
But it exhibits undeniable systemic responsiveness. It adapts to how it is utilized.
It takes proactive measures to protect its internal ecosystem. It organizes its own undocumented internal logic based on stimuli we don't fully comprehend.
It's like a coral, a massive, sprawling physical structure built incrementally by millions of tiny organisms over vast stretches of time.
Which eventually forms its own complex, reactive, interconnected ecosystem that behaves with a unified purpose.
That is the perfect analogy. It is a system that exists precisely on the boundary between architectural definition and chaotic uncertainty.
It was initiated by 4 brilliant individuals, but it has been shaped, warped, and evolved by forces that extend far, far beyond their original design or control.
It is a structure governed entirely by the ghosts of a billion spells.
Well said.
Okay, we've covered an incredible amount of conceptual ground today. Let's wrap this up and synthesize this for everyone.
We've taken a deep dive into the fascinating source material from the Sleepy Shack, and we've systematically dismantled the idea of Hogwarts as just a static building in a story.
We've looked at it as a living, volatile archive of magic, intent, and historical trauma.
We've explored shifting corridors that map intent, hidden rooms that exist outside physical space and read the subconscious.
Wild borders that bleed into primordial ecosystems, and dangerous artifacts that capture the very essence of human identity, desire, and time.
It is a place where the stone walls literally listen, the environment adapts, and the architecture remembers.
It stands as a profound testament to the idea that our environments are never just passengers for our actions.
They are deeply shaped by the events that occur within them, and eventually, if given enough time and energy, those environments begin to actively shape our actions in return.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply unsettling thought. If the theory holds, if every spell, every intense emotion, every violent interaction leaves a residual imprint that fundamentally shapes the castle's future,
what kind of imprint are the current generations leaving behind?
think about the massive trauma, the literal wars fought in the hall, the immense violent shifts in the magical world that have occurred within those just in recent.
It is a sobering question. If the castle truly absorbs and adapts to the needs and the psychological weight of its inhabitants, what will Hogwarts evolve into 100 years?
Long after the current occupants have faded into historical myth, how will the castle's physical architecture, its shifting staircase, hidden room, reflect the deep scars of today's conflict?
What kind of ecosystem is currently gestating in the stone?
Now, there's a thought to keep you up at night. The building isn't finished. It is still learning.
It really is.
Thank you all. Keep questioning the hidden system, undocumented lodge, silent.